Assalamu alaikum. I had an incident 10 years ago at a Walmart store. I took my daughter, who was at the time 8 years old, and I was at the customer service line waiting to make a return. And I was talking to her in Spanish because I was trying to teach her Spanish at the time. In front of me was this tall woman. So out of curiosity, she turned around to see who's this person talking in Spanish. So as soon as she turned around, she had this big shock in her face, like, what? She sees me, she sees this, she hears Spanish, but she's not connecting the dots. Like, what? You're speaking Spanish? And she blurts out, like, oh my God, you're speaking Spanish. And I said, yeah, I'm Mexican. And then her next question was, which was the turning point, was the lesson that I had to learn was, is it true that your husband beats you up? And I didn't answer her. I was more like shocked by her question because she was equally shocked that she saw me as a Muslim Latina wearing hijab and talking Spanish, as I was shocked by her question. So from the expression on my face, she immediately thought like, oh, well, sorry, I didn't mean to ask that, but I did. And she answered her own question by saying, no, I think that it's Mexican men who beat up their wives. And I just said, well, I don't know. And from that incident, I decided to take it upon myself to investigate the reason why women in Islam are not oppressed. And so that way I could be more prepared to answer these kinds of questions, which is logical. I mean, they see that every day, women beating, women beheading, women being beat up and flogged or stoned. And it's more of a cultural or national point of interpretation where it's not Islamically correct to do these kinds of things to women. One of the major things that I believe are taken out of context from the Quran, it's one little tiny sentence that states that a man can discipline his wife by hitting her. Now that hitting is with like the size of a stick, of a miswak, which is like the size of a pencil, and that's just like a slap on a wrist. So that sentence, it's totally taken out of context by the non-Muslims. And if you look at the whole Quran, which is like, this thick, and to focus on one little sentence, it just doesn't make sense. So, and another thing that is also quoted on the Quran that protects the women is that men and women are a garment to each other, which means it's a protection for both men and women. So the idea of women being oppressed just doesn't make sense, and it doesn't fit into the logic of what it states in the Quran. It also states that women and men should be treated with kind and harmony and fairness. That doesn't sound oppressive to me at all. One of the basic rights that's also given to women is the right of inheritance. Again, this is in the Quran, and every single percentage is spelled out in the Quran, from women to grandmothers to mothers to aunts to children to daughters, everything. So that's another point that is clearly stated in the Quran, that it does not oppress the women. It's more of like a financial duty and obligation that must be carried out in detailed. And another thing about marriage, when a woman goes into a marriage, she is not allowed to be coerced into marriage. She's not forced to marry somebody that she doesn't want to. That is also not even a sign of oppression. So when you hear these statements on the media that a 7-year-old was forced into marriage, a 5-year-old, I mean, you hear even today, I read that today, a 5-year-old? Come on, this is absurd. It has no basis in Islam because of the rights that are clearly stated in a God-given guidebook. So all of these cultural and national ideas that go in to replace the rulings of Islam, it's baseless, which has nothing to do with Islam whatsoever. In regards to marriage, a woman is also allowed to keep her own last name. It does not demean the husband's last name at all. It does not insult him or degrade him or anything at all. It's a choice, and there's no confusion about that. Women are also given different roles than men. We are equal, but different. And our roles are defined clearly in the Quran, what our duties are. For example, the men are seen as the protectors and providers for women, and women are the caretakers for the families. And again, that has nothing to do with oppression. It just clearly states that there's no confusion as far as what we're supposed to do. It's clearly defined. And with that, when the marriage, it's the men's right to provide the maintenance, the daily maintenance of the woman. Food, clothing, shelter, education. And if a woman chooses to get a job while she is married, she has a right to do that too. And on top of that, keep that income. And she can choose to include that income to support the family or not. So that, again, does not sound oppressive at all. The basic human rights for the women are clearly stated in the Quran. So to say that anything that I have mentioned that is stated in the Quran is just, there's no indication that women are oppressed at all. In fact, these rights were given to us 1400 years ago, whereas the majority of women were just barely attaining these rights about 40, 45, 50 years ago. So next time that someone, anyone, it could be a woman, it could be a man, it could be a Latino, it could be a Latina, an Asian, anything, that asked us, are women oppressed in Islam? Then we are equipped. We need to do our research and to answer these questions logically, not in a manner that would not make sense, but logically speaking, if the Quran says that it treats women with dignity and respect, there is no basis to think that women are oppressed in anything that relates to a woman's duties at all. So let's just close by saying, let's educate ourselves to that way we are not oppressed. Thank you.